In 1699, a man stood on a gallows in London with a rope around his neck, screaming at the crowd that he was innocent, that his treasure could prove it, that if they'd just let him live long enough to retrieve it, he could buy his freedom and expose the politicians who'd set him up. Nobody listened. The rope snapped on the first drop. They had to hang Captain William Kidd twice. And somewhere between the coast of Madagascar, the islands of the Caribbean, and the shores of New England, a fortune in gold, silver, silk, and gemstones vanished into history. Kidd's treasure has never been found. Not all of it, anyway. But Kidd's is only one of dozens of pirate fortunes that disappeared during the Golden Age of Piracy. Buried on unnamed islands, sunk in shipwrecks nobody ever located, hidden in caves that colonial maps forgot. Some of these treasures have been hunted for 300 years. Entire families have gone bankrupt chasing them. Governments have launched expeditions. Con men have built empires selling fake treasure maps. And every single one of these hoards is still out there, somewhere. Today, we're going across 5 oceans and 3 centuries to track down the 5 most legendary pirate treasures ever lost. We'll follow the maps, the clues, the deathbed confessions, and the trail of dead treasure hunters who got close, but never close enough. Imagine a map of the world spreading across your screen right now: the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the South Pacific, the Caribbean. 5 glowing points scattered across the globe, each one marking a fortune that vanished centuries ago and has never resurfaced. Let's start with the oldest, the one that sank in the most violent storm in maritime history. Treasure number 1. The Flor de la Mar. The year was 1511. The place was the Strait of Malacca, the narrow channel of water between modern-day Malaysia and the island of Sumatra. This was the most important shipping lane in the world. Every ounce of spice, silk, porcelain, and gold moving between China, India, and the Middle East had to pass through this corridor. Whoever controlled the strait controlled the wealth of Asia. And in 1511, that person was Afonso de Albuquerque, the Portuguese viceroy of the Indies, and arguably the most ruthless naval commander of his era. Albuquerque had just conquered the Sultanate of Malacca in a brutal siege. The city was one of the richest trading ports on earth. It was the place where Chinese junks met Arab dhows, where Indian merchants traded rubies for nutmeg, where gold dust was measured by the barrel. When Albuquerque's forces took the city, they looted the Sultan's palace down to the floorboards. The treasure they seized was almost incomprehensible. Contemporary Portuguese accounts describe 60 tons of gold bullion, chests overflowing with diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires from the mines of Golconda in India. Carved ivory, Chinese porcelain so fine you could see light through it, jewel-encrusted thrones, golden statues of lions and elephants, a table made of solid gold that reportedly took 4 men to carry. All of it was loaded onto the Flor de la Mar, the flagship of the Portuguese fleet. She was the largest carrack in the Indian Ocean, a massive warship that had served Portugal for nearly a decade. And she was about to make the voyage back to Lisbon, where this treasure would fund Portugal's expansion for the next 50 years. There was just one problem. The Flor de la Mar was old. Her hull was riddled with worm damage. Her captain had warned Albuquerque that the ship was unseaworthy. Multiple officers had objected to loading the heaviest treasure haul in history onto a vessel that was already leaking. Albuquerque didn't care. This was his victory, his treasure, his ship. On November 20th, 1511, the Flor de la Mar sailed into a typhoon off the northeast coast of Sumatra. The storm was catastrophic. Winds ripped the sails to ribbons. Waves crashed over the deck. The overloaded hull split apart somewhere near the Tanjung Jambu Air Reef. Albuquerque survived. He was pulled from the water by a smaller vessel and eventually made it back to Portuguese territory. But the Flor de la Mar, along with the entire treasure of Malacca, went to the bottom of the strait. The estimated value of what sank that night has been calculated by modern historians at somewhere between $2 and $3 billion in today's money. Some estimates go even higher. It is, by almost every measure, the single most valuable shipwreck in history. And for 500 years, nobody has found it. It's not for lack of trying. The Indonesian government, the Malaysian government, the Portuguese government, and at least a dozen private salvage companies have all mounted expeditions to locate the Flor de Limar. In the 1990s, an American salvage company claimed to have identified the wreck site using sonar, but the Indonesian government revoked their permits before any excavation could begin. In 2014, a joint Portuguese-Malaysian team announced they had narrowed the search area to a section of the strait near the island of Nias. But no wreck was recovered. The problem is the strait itself. The Strait of Malacca is one of the busiest waterways on Earth. Over 90,000 ships pass through it every year. The seafloor is covered in centuries of silt, debris, and modern pollution. Tidal currents shift the sand constantly. And the wreck, if it's even intact, has been sitting there for over 500 years in warm, biologically active water that destroys wood and corrodes metal. Some historians believe the treasure was scattered across miles of ocean floor when the hull broke apart. Others think the main cargo hold went down largely intact and is simply buried under 30 feet of sediment. Either way, the Flor de Limar remains the holy grail of maritime archaeology. Before we go any further, I need to stop for a second, because what I've been showing you in these videos only scratches the surface. And I realized at some point that the full picture, the actual pirate code, word for word, the real punishment records, the exact treasure division shares, the ports that secretly funded them, it doesn't fit in a video. I put it all into one document, the Black Flag Codex. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's keep going. Billions of dollars in gold, gemstones, and artifacts from the height of the Malaccan Empire, sitting somewhere at the bottom of a strait that half the world's shipping traffic crosses every single day. Nobody's found it. The treasure is still down there. Treasure number 2, the treasure of Lima. Now let's move halfway around the world to 1820 and a story so outrageous that Robert Louis Stevenson may have used it as the basis for Treasure Island. Lima, Peru was the jewel of the Spanish Empire in South America. For nearly 3 centuries, the Catholic Church and the Spanish colonial government had been accumulating wealth in the city. Gold and silver mined from the Andes, religious artifacts encrusted with emeralds, a life-sized solid gold statue of the Virgin Mary, jeweled swords, ceremonial chalices, hundreds of chests of gold coins. The total value of the Lima Cathedral's holdings alone was estimated at somewhere between $12 and $60 million in 1820 currency, which translates to several billion today. Then revolution came. By 1820, José de San Martin's independence forces were closing in on Lima. The Spanish viceroy panicked. He ordered the entire treasure of the city loaded onto ships in the port of Callao for transport to Mexico, where it would be safe from the revolutionaries. 11 ships were loaded. One of them was a British merchant vessel called the Mary Dear, captained by a Scottish trader named William Thompson. Thompson was hired specifically because he was considered trustworthy. He was a respected merchant captain with years of experience in South American waters. The Spanish authorities posted armed guards aboard the Mary Dear to watch the cargo. What happened next depends on which version of the story you believe. The most common account says Thompson and his crew murdered the Spanish guards on the first night at sea, threw their bodies overboard, and sailed directly for Cocos Island, a tiny volcanic speck in the Pacific Ocean about 340 miles off the coast of Costa Rica. On Cocos Island, Thompson and his crew allegedly buried the entire treasure of Lima in a cave system along the island's rugged coastline. Then they sailed away, planning to return later when the heat died down. They never got the chance. A Spanish warship intercepted the Mary Dear within weeks. The crew was captured. Every single man was hanged for piracy, except for Thompson and his first mate, who bargained for their lives by promising to lead the Spanish back to the treasure. When they arrived at Cocos Island, Thompson and the first mate escaped into the jungle and hid until the Spanish gave up looking for them. The first mate reportedly died on the island. Thompson eventually made it off, possibly picked up by a passing whaler, and spent the rest of his life in Newfoundland, Canada, never returning for the treasure. On his deathbed, Thompson allegedly gave a set of directions to a friend named John Keating. Keating made at least 2 trips to Cocos Island and claimed to have recovered a small portion of the treasure, including a handful of gold coins and a jeweled sword. But he said the main hoard, the bulk of the Lima Cathedral's gold, was still hidden deep in the island's cave system, sealed behind a rockfall that he couldn't clear alone. Since then, Cocos Island has been the target of over 300 documented treasure expeditions. The most famous was led by August Gissler, a German adventurer who lived on the island for 17 years, from 1894 to 1911. He dug hundreds of trenches and tunnels across the island. He found nothing. In 1931, a Belgian expedition used early metal detection equipment and reported significant readings in a cave system on the island's western coast. Before they could excavate, the Costa Rican government revoked their permits. Franklin Roosevelt visited Cocos Island 3 times during fishing trips in the 1930s and 1940s. He was openly obsessed with the treasure and reportedly spent hours studying maps and geological surveys of the island. Today, Cocos Island is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a Costa Rican national park. Treasure hunting is officially banned. The Costa Rican government has declared the entire island a protected area. No excavation, no digging, no metal detection. The treasure of Lima, if it was ever actually buried on Cocos Island, is still there. Under the jungle floor, inside a volcanic cave system, on a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific that the government won't let anyone touch. Worth an estimated $1 to $2 billion. Untouched for over 200 years. Treasure number 3, the cryptogram of Buse. This one is unlike any other pirate treasure story, because the pirate who hid this fortune left behind a coded message telling the world exactly where it was. And after nearly 3 centuries, nobody has cracked the code. Olivier Levasseur was a French pirate who operated in the Indian Ocean during the 1720s. He went by the name Buse, which means the buzzard in French. He earned the nickname for the speed and ferocity of his attacks. He would circle merchant ships like a bird of prey before swooping in for the kill. Buse was part of a loose confederation of pirates based out of Madagascar and the islands of the western Indian Ocean. This was the tail end of the Golden Age of Piracy, and the Indian Ocean was one of the last places where pirates could operate with relative freedom. The Mughal Empire's trade ships, the Portuguese spice fleet, the Dutch East India Company's cargo vessels, all of them passed through these waters loaded with unimaginable wealth. In April 1721, Buse pulled off what might be the single biggest pirate heist in history. A Portuguese galleon called the Nossa Senhora do Cabo, also known as the Virgen del Cabo, was anchored in the harbor of Saint-Denis on the island of Réunion. The ship was carrying the personal fortune of the retiring Portuguese Viceroy of the Indies, along with a massive shipment bound for Lisbon. The cargo included diamonds from Goa, gold bars, chests of gold coins, Chinese silk, religious artifacts from Portuguese churches across Asia, and the legendary Flaming Cross of Goa, a solid gold crucifix encrusted with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds that was said to be 7 feet tall. The total value of the haul has been estimated at over 100 million British pounds at the time. In modern currency, that's somewhere between $4 and $5 billion. Yes, billion. Buse and his crew took every last ounce of it. For the next 9 years, Buse lived as one of the wealthiest pirates in history. Stop for a second. What you just heard about the pirate code is the part that rewrites everything you thought you knew. But it only lands when you see the actual shares, the exact fractions written into the Articles of Agreement, the punishments, the port records, the names of the men who funded them from government offices. It's all in the Black Flag Codex, linked in the description. 5 seconds. Grab it now, because what comes next builds directly on it. Link is below. QR code is on your screen. He retired to the Seychelles, then to Madagascar, spending lavishly but never revealing where the bulk of his fortune was hidden. French colonial authorities eventually caught up with him in 1730. He was captured on Madagascar, tried for piracy, and sentenced to death. And this is where the legend really begins. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, as Buse stood on the scaffold with the noose around his neck, he ripped a necklace from around his throat and hurled it into the crowd. Dangling from the necklace was a small piece of parchment covered in symbols, letters, and numbers. "Find my treasure, the one who may understand it," he supposedly shouted to the crowd. Then they hanged him. The cryptogram, as it became known, has survived. Multiple copies exist in archives across France, Réunion, and the Seychelles. The original parchment has never been verified, but the copies are consistent enough that most historians believe they derive from an authentic source. The cipher consists of 17 lines of symbols. Some appear to be Greek letters. Others look like Masonic or alchemical symbols. Some are numbers. Some are shapes that don't correspond to any known alphabet. Portions of the text appear to reference locations on the islands of Réunion, Mauritius, the Seychelles, and the east coast of Madagascar. Hundreds of people have attempted to decode it. Professional cryptographers, retired military intelligence officers, university mathematics departments, amateur treasure hunters with supercomputers. A French historian named Charles Bourrel de la Roncière published a partial translation in the 1930s that he claimed pointed to a cave system on Mahé Island in the Seychelles. His translation was later discredited. In the 1940s, a British treasure hunter named Reginald Cruz Wilkins moved to Mahé and spent the rest of his life, over 25 years, excavating cave systems based on his own interpretation of the cryptogram. He found several artifacts that he believed were connected to Buse, including old coins and fragments of what might have been a chest, but he never found the main treasure. His son John continued the search after his death and was still digging on Mahé as recently as the early 2000s. Modern cryptanalysts have applied computer analysis to the cipher with mixed results. Some believe the code is a simple substitution cipher that has been intentionally corrupted with false symbols to prevent easy translation. Others think it's a location cipher that only makes sense when overlaid on a specific map that no longer exists. The treasure of Buse is estimated at between $4 and $5 billion in modern value. The coded map that allegedly reveals its location has been studied by some of the best minds in cryptography. And after nearly 300 years, nobody has solved it. The gold, the diamonds, the flaming cross of Goa. All of it is still out there, somewhere on an island in the Indian Ocean, waiting for someone smart enough or lucky enough to crack a dead pirate's code. Treasure number 4. Blackbeard's missing fortune. Edward Teach. Blackbeard, the most famous pirate who ever lived. When people think of pirates, they think of Blackbeard, the massive frame, the wild black beard braided with smoking fuses that made him look like a demon rising from the sea. The fleet of warships that terrorized the Atlantic coast of North America for 2 solid years between 1716 and 1718. But here's the part of the story most people miss. When Blackbeard died, when Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy finally killed him in a savage hand-to-hand battle off the coast of North Carolina in November 1718, the British found almost nothing of value on his ship. That's the mystery. Blackbeard captured over 40 merchant vessels during his career. His flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, was a captured French slave ship that he converted into a 40-gun warship. He blockaded the port of Charleston, South Carolina, holding the entire city hostage. He plundered ships carrying gold, silver, sugar, rum, indigo, cocoa, and silks. Conservative estimates of Blackbeard's total plunder over his career range from $5 to $10 million in period currency. Some historians put it much higher. Where did all that money go? It wasn't on the Adventure, the sloop he was sailing when Maynard killed him. Maynard's men searched every inch of the ship and found some sugar, cotton, and cocoa. No gold, no silver, no treasure of any kind. It wasn't at his base in Bathtown, North Carolina, where Blackbeard had been living semi-openly under the protection of Governor Charles Eden. The governor's own men searched the area after Blackbeard's death and found nothing. And it wasn't aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge, which had run aground near Beaufort, North Carolina, several months before Blackbeard's death. When the wreck was discovered in 1996 and excavated over the following decades, archaeologists found cannons, anchors, medical instruments, navigation tools, and everyday objects. They found gold dust, a handful of gold flakes, but no treasure hoard. So where is it? There are three main theories. The first is that Blackbeard spent it. He was known for throwing lavish parties, bribing officials, and paying his crew generously. Some historians argue there simply was no accumulated fortune because Blackbeard lived hard and spent everything as fast as he stole it. But this doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Blackbeard's career generated millions. Even the most extravagant spending can't account for all of it. And multiple contemporaries, including members of his own crew who survived the final battle, stated that Blackbeard had hidden a significant portion of his wealth. The second theory points to Plum Point, a small spit of land on the Pamlico Sound in North Carolina. This was Blackbeard's favorite anchorage, and local legend has maintained for 3 centuries that he buried treasure there. Several expeditions have dug at Plum Point over the years, and a few have reported finding old coins, but nothing resembling a major hoard. The third and most intriguing theory involves the network of tidal creeks and islands along the coast between Ocracoke Island and Bethtown. This is wild, marshy terrain that hasn't changed much in 300 years. Blackbeard knew these waterways better than anyone alive. He could navigate channels that no other captain would attempt. If he wanted to hide something where nobody else could find it, this is exactly the kind of landscape that would swallow a chest of gold and never give it back. In 2015, a group of researchers using ground-penetrating radar identified several anomalies buried beneath the sand on a small, unnamed island in the Pamlico Sound. The anomalies were consistent with the density of metal objects. Excavation was planned but never completed due to permitting issues with the state of North Carolina. Blackbeard's treasure remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries in pirate history. Somewhere along the outer banks of North Carolina, in the tidal marshes and barrier islands that Blackbeard called home, there may be a fortune in gold and silver that has been sitting undisturbed since 1718. Nobody's found it. The coast keeps its secrets. Treasure number 5. Captain Kidd's lost fortune. We started this story with Captain Kidd on the gallows. Now let's go back and tell the full story, because Kidd's treasure is the one that launched 3 centuries of treasure hunting and may be the most misunderstood pirate fortune in history. William Kidd wasn't born a pirate. He was born in Dundee, Scotland, around 1654, and he spent most of his career as a legitimate privateer and merchant captain. He was a wealthy man in his own right, owning property in New York City and moving in the highest circles of colonial society. He was friends with governors. He dined with aristocrats. He was as far from the stereotypical pirate as you could get. In 1695, Kidd was commissioned by a group of powerful English lords, including the Earl of Bellamont and several members of the Whig Party, to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean. His ship was the Adventure Galley, a 34-gun warship fitted out specifically for the mission. His commission was signed by King William III himself. What happened over the next 3 years is one of the most debated episodes in maritime history. Kidd sailed to the Indian Ocean and, depending on who you believe, either turned pirate himself or was forced into acts of piracy by a mutinous crew and impossible circumstances. The key event was the capture of the Quedagh Merchant in January 1698, an Armenian-owned ship sailing under French passes and carrying a massive cargo of gold, silver, silk, muslins, sugar, iron, saltpeter, and opium. The cargo was valued at between 200,000 and 400,000 British pounds at the time. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $50 to $100 million today. Kidd claimed the capture was legal because the ship was sailing under French passes, making it a legitimate prize under his commission. The East India Company, whose trade the capture disrupted, disagreed violently and pressured the British government to declare Kidd a pirate. Here's where the treasure enters the story. After the capture of the Quedagh Merchant, Kidd knew he was in trouble. He sailed to the Caribbean, where he abandoned the Quedagh Merchant and transferred to a smaller sloop. He then sailed north along the American coast, making multiple stops at islands and coastal locations. What was he doing during those stops? He was burying treasure. We know this for a fact because one cache was actually found. In 1699, before sailing to Boston to try to negotiate his surrender, Kidd buried a chest of gold, silver, and jewels on Gardiner's Island, a small private island off the eastern tip of Long Island, New York. He left it with the island's owner, John Gardiner, as a kind of insurance policy. When Kidd was arrested in Boston, the authorities retrieved the Gardiner's Island treasure. The inventory listed gold dust, bars of silver, rubies, diamonds, and other precious stones. Total value, about 14,000 pounds. But the Quedagh merchant's cargo was worth between 200,000 and 400,000 pounds. The Gardiner's Island cache was a fraction of the total haul. Where was the rest? Kidd insisted at his trial that he could produce the missing treasure if given time and freedom to retrieve it. He said it was hidden and that the politicians who had commissioned him knew exactly where. He implied that his backers, the same lords who had financed his voyage, had already taken a portion and were now throwing him to the wolves to cover their involvement. The politicians denied everything. Kidd was convicted and hanged, and the missing treasure, somewhere between 200,000 and 350,000 pounds of gold, silver, silk, and gemstones, vanished from history. The search for Kidd's treasure has been one of the longest-running treasure hunts in the world. Over 300 years, hundreds of expeditions, thousands of treasure hunters, multiple continents. The most popular search locations include Oak Island in Nova Scotia, where the famous Money Pit has attracted treasure hunters since 1795, and where some researchers believe Kidd or members of his crew buried a significant cache. The island has swallowed millions of dollars in excavation costs and claimed at least 6 lives, but the treasure, if there is one, has never been recovered. Block Island, Rhode Island, has been another focus. Local legend says Kidd stopped there during his run up the coast and buried treasure near a formation called Kidd's Rock. Multiple digs have found nothing. Charles Island in Milford, Connecticut has a similar legend. So does Thimble Islands. So does Money Island in the mangrove swamps of the Florida Keys. So does Deer Isle, Maine. In 2015, a team of underwater archaeologists found a 50-kilogram silver bar off the coast of Ile Sainte-Marie in Madagascar, near the site where the Adventure galley was scuttled. The bar was initially identified as part of Kidd's treasure. Further analysis cast doubt on the connection, but the find reignited interest in the possibility that Kidd had hidden treasure in Madagascar before heading west. The truth is, nobody knows where the bulk of Kidd's fortune ended up. Some of it may have been seized by his political backers and quietly absorbed into their personal estates. Some of it may have been distributed among crew members who disappeared into the population of colonial America, and some of it, possibly a very large portion, may still be buried on an island, in a cave, or under a sandbar somewhere along the Atlantic coast. Captain Kidd went to the gallows screaming that his treasure could save him. 327 years later, it still hasn't been found. 5 treasures, 5 fortunes, 3 centuries. The Flor de la Mar, somewhere at the bottom of the Strait of Malacca, holding the plundered wealth of the Sultanate of Malacca. Worth an estimated $2 to $3 billion. The treasure of Lima, allegedly buried in the cave systems of Cocos Island by a Scottish merchant captain who murdered his way to a fortune and spent the rest of his life in hiding. Worth an estimated $1 to $2 billion. The cryptogram of Buse, a coded treasure map thrown from a pirate's neck at the moment of his execution, pointing to a hoard of Indian Ocean gold and the legendary Flaming Cross of Goa. Worth an estimated $4 to $5 billion. The code has never been cracked. Blackbeard's missing fortune vanished from the Barrier Islands and tidal marshes of North Carolina, unaccounted for since the day Lieutenant Maynard cut off his head and hung it from the bowsprit. Worth an estimated $5 to $10 million in period currency. And Captain Kidd's lost treasure, scattered along the Atlantic coast by a desperate man racing against his own death sentence. Worth an estimated $50 to $100 million in modern value. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented historical events with real ships, real names, real dates, and real cargo manifests. The gold is real, the diamonds are real, the maps and ciphers and deathbed confessions are real. And every single one of these treasures is still out there. Right now, under the ocean floor, inside a volcanic cave, buried beneath 3 centuries of sand and jungle, and forgetting. The question isn't whether pirate treasure exists. It does. The question is whether anyone alive today will be the one to find it. 300 years of searching says probably not. But 300 years of failure has never stopped a treasure hunter before, and it won't stop the next one.